certainly just a highlight of life. In 1953, the American College Dictionary Committee came together, and they were going to vote on an addendum to the word Christian. And they came together and looked at it and realized that there was necessary usage, the need for a change. And they voted on it, it passed, and they added it to the definition. Well, several years ago, an evangelist, he was in Alabama. He walked up to me and he handed me this book. He said, "Preacher, Christians have been trying to pry this book out of my hands all my life, but I wouldn't give it to them." He said, "But it's yours." And I looked at it and said, the American College Dictionary, and I was unaware of the reason why I would want a dictionary. So I said, "Brother, I don't understand. I mean, I have a lot of dictionaries. Why do I want this dictionary?" And he said, "This isn't just any ordinary dictionary." He said, "I want you to open to the word Christian, and I want you to read it to me." So I opened the dictionary, and I came to the word Christian, and then I began reading. And I want to read to you what they did to that word, 1953. It says, "Pertaining to or deriving from Jesus Christ are his teachings." It says, "Exhibiting the Spirit of Christ, being a follower of Jesus Christ, one who believes in Jesus Christ, one who exemplifies the life and teachings of Christ." I continued to read through these words until I realized that the addendum they made to the word Christian was the word Campbellite, a member of the Church of Christ. In 1953, we were of such significance in this nation, they had to literally change the definition of the word to accommodate the usage in America. And they put you in there. There's no other religious group ever mentioned to my knowledge. They kept this definition from 1953, 1954, 55, 56, 57, 58, and it continued. And they had this addendum to the word. The word Christian means Campbellite, a member of the Church of Christ. I know some of you in the audience, you don't recognize that term Campbellite. And maybe you've never heard of that term applied to a member of the Church of Christ. And there's a reason for that. Because in 1953, what they would do is they would make fun of Christians. And they would use the word Campbellite as a term of derision, a term to put down. And so they did this over and over again, and they were referring to an old preacher by the name of Alexander Campbell. They said, "You Campbellite, you Campbellite." Well, some of you in the audience have never heard of that term. You've never been called a Campbellite. You say, "Preacher, isn't it good that we live in a culture where we don't have to have these names, these slurred speech names given to the Church of Christ?" And I would ask you to consider the reason. The reason people don't refer to you as a Campbellite today is because most people don't know the difference between the Church of Christ and a Mennonite. They don't have to make fun of you. You've done their job for them. We have sat in our pews. We have played church for so long. They have no reason to feel threatened. We're not growing. Their members are not leaving. We're not evangelizing. We're not converting. Every year our numbers get smaller and smaller, and there is no need to make fun of you anymore. You have done their job for them. Oh, for the day that they would call us a name of derision, where they could not defeat your doctrine, and so what they would do is just make fun of you. They could not put down your belief system, so they just make fun of you. And so what we find in 1953 is the Church of Christ was gaining such ground that they had to do something, but they couldn't defeat your doctrine, they couldn't beat you in debate, and so they just started slurring you. Brother, we had such rapid growth during the 1950s and 60s that they literally had teams of men that would travel around this country, and all they would do is build church buildings. They would just build church buildings, these A-frame church buildings, and they would build them as fast as they could. In fact, there are many of them all around this nation. They have this old wooden paneling on the side. And the Bible classes are accessed from the sides of the church building. There may be an elongated auditorium, a hallway, and they're just all over the landscape of this nation. And that's because the same group of men traveled building these church buildings. Today, we have these church buildings that can seat 1,000 people, and they don't have 60 members left. I can't tell you how many congregations I've been to that seat 500, they seat 400. And you find that even some of the churches are closing off sections of their building because they cannot economically afford to keep it open. And they're selling their buildings because they cannot afford them anymore. And they can't pay the utility bill. And so we've gone from the 1950s and 60s and 70s, when we were the fastest religious growing body in America, to a point now where most people don't know the difference between a Mennonite and the Church of Christ. In fact, when you say, I'm a member of the Church of Christ, they say, are you a Mormon? Because they've stolen that identifying name. I want to talk to you tonight about growth. I want to talk about congregational growth. I want to talk about the growth of the New Testament that's required in order for a church to survive. And I'm not talking about individual growth. I'm talking about congregational growth. I'm talking about a church realizing that evangelism at its core is congregational. And you've got to get your members involved. And we need our men to step up. Our ladies are ready to work. Our ladies are on fire. You don't have to slow them down because they're going to run you over. And our men are sitting in our church buildings. We can't find them. Where are they? I don't know. We have 2 churches of Christ represented tonight, and I want to know where the men are. The students from Free Harbin outnumber you. It's embarrassing. Brethren, our men are found wanting. And because our men are not leading our churches are dying. Our men need to put their toys away. Our men need to realize where the battle is being fought. Your home is being destroyed. Your home is crumbling. Your nation is falling apart. Because our men are not leading in our churches, we're finding that our communities they're in disrepair. Our children are hurting. And our men are playing with their toys, their boats, and their whatever it is. Their deer leases, they're hunting and they're fishing, and some of them are playing with their computers and video games. And our churches are all over America, and they're screaming, I need help. We need the men. And I pray to God some men are watching this tonight. So I'm asking, where are you? The Church of Christ needs men. The Church of Christ needs men to lead. The Church of Christ needs men to stand up. The Church of Christ needs workers, strong men, courageous men, faithful men. Men that are willing to make the tough decisions. Men that are willing to lead when it's not popular. Men that are willing to take their family and say, listen, we've got to get involved. We've got to get busy. Men that are willing to take the heat. Men that are strong. Joshua was told by God, be strong and very courageous. Turn not to the left hand, turn not to the right hand. You fear God. You keep His commandments. This is the whole duty of man. Instead, our homes in many places are headless. I want to take you to the book of Ephesians, if you would, and I want us to look at a passage together, and I want us to consider what the New Testament church needed to grow, and why the New Testament church grew, and how we can duplicate that today. See, the New Testament church didn't grow accidentally. It didn't grow because of a wish list. The New Testament church grew because we understand that church was dedicated to following God's orders, to following God's patterns. And that pattern is shown forth in Ephesians 4, and I want to show it to you. In Ephesians chapter 4, verse 11, the Bible says, and He gave some to be apostles. And that first century church needed apostles. They had no elders. They needed leaders, men to step up and lead. And those apostles, you see, were gifted by God, given the Holy Spirit in a miraculous format in order to enable Christians to perform miracles, to have direct revelation from God. They had no New Testament. These apostles were organizing the church. These apostles were teaching churches, establishing churches. It was a limited office. And they needed these men to do their job in order for the church of Christ to be formed and grow. Look at what else he says. You need to have prophets. Well, these men were inspired men that had no New Testament. They couldn't quote the book of Matthew. There was no book of Matthew. They were writing it. There was no book of John, no book of Acts, no book of Ephesians. And so these prophets were endowed by God by inspiration. And they were able to teach. They were able to communicate the mind of God to the people. We don't have prophets today. We have the New Testament. So that's not what we're missing. So we're not missing apostles, limited in scope. We're not missing prophets, not needed today in a limited time. But there's something else they had. And I want you to focus on this word because we're woefully inadequate. We're missing them. I want you to look carefully. In Ephesians 4:11, and some were evangelists. Not all. We don't need everyone to be an evangelist, but some were. What's the word evangelist mean? These are those who speak forth, sound out, trumpet out. They trumpet out the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And they, in the first century, had these men, and their job was to sound forth, trumpet out, to herald forth the message of the gospel. And brothers and sisters, the New Testament church needed these men. Without these men, the church would have never made it. And in fact, these men were charged with a certain job. And I want you to look at it very carefully. In verse number 11, verse 12, he says, for, here's why you need them. For the completion, perfection, for the organization of the saints. In other words, in order to perfect and complete the church, you need evangelists. And the evangelists are given by God a divine message. And I want you to look at it. It's in verse number 12. It's to build up the body of Christ. That's the job of an evangelist. An evangelist helps to build. They're builders. They build up the local church. I want to know tonight, where are your evangelists? Who are they? What are their names? So I visit churches of Christ all over this country. And I see their websites, and I see the list of positions. Positions. And we have the community involvement minister, God bless him. We have the congregational involvement minister, God bless him. We have the young professional minister, God bless him. We have the college minister, thank God. And we have the youth minister. We cannot survive without that one. And then we have the teen minister, and we have the senior minister, and we have the family life minister, and we have the marriage minister, and the counselors. And then, of course, don't forget, the ladies have their offices too. The ladies will have various positions, of course, with the children. But there's one thing I can't find. And I've been searching. I've been looking. I scroll through the websites. I look at their doors and the positions and the titles. And I don't know. I know it's hard for some of you who are younger to understand this. But listen, I was you. I sat in those pews. I grew up in the Church of Christ. And I'll tell you, in 1990, when I was sitting in the Church of Christ, you couldn't find hardly any of those titles. None of them existed. But they all exist today. Are we better or worse? Have we grown? I want to know where the evangelists are. I want to know where the men are that are designated and they're appointed, and their job is to equip the local church to grow. Where are the builders? Where are the men in the church that are designed to be builders? And your job is to build, to bring people, to evangelize, and to equip the members to do the same. Brothers, I'm still searching. I'd like to know where they are. Until we get our churches equipped like this, and we get those evangelists back in, brethren, all these titles we give people, they mean very little. All we have now, we have the technology preacher. We actually hire preachers, and their whole job is technology. I'm not against technology. And I'm sure there's value for it. And if you are in those positions, hear me clearly. I am not belittling you in any way. But I sure would like to know where the evangelist is. At least that's a biblical title. At least I can read about it in the Bible. I I sure would like to know where they're at. I want you to look at a few words here, verse number 13. Look at the word here, to mature. One version says that their job is to mature the church. I want you to go down to verse number 14 and notice that if the church is not doing that, they're called children. But when the church begins to mature, they're no more children, tossed to and fro by every wind of doctrine, the slight cunningness and craftiness of men. And in verse 15, you speak the truth in love that you may grow. What do we need to do? We need to grow. We need evangelists to help the church grow. Not everybody's an evangelist, but at least we need a few. We need a few evangelists in our church to help us. So who are the evangelists at Waldorf? Who are the evangelists at La Plata? Who are the evangelists in your home church in Henderson? I want to know who they are. You're going to ask this, who's your evangelist? I mean, you go around Freed Hardman, you start looking and look at these churches. You look at their big churches, they got hundreds and hundreds of members and massive budgets that put them into $25,000 and $30,000 a week range. And they got lots of titles. I mean, we got a lot of titles in office. I want to know where the evangelist is. I'm searching, I'm still looking. I can't find him, Charles. We don't even call preachers preachers anymore. And I would like to know where all these names came from. Why are we calling our people by all these names and titles? Where did we get this from? Because I know we didn't get it here. Again, I'm not suggesting they're sinful. Maybe there's good use for them. But I have a sneaky suspicion we've been looking out here in the religious world, and we've looked at the community churches and the denominational churches, and we say, well, that sounds pretty good. It's not sinful. They're growing. Why don't we try that? And if we'd have a community life center, we'd grow. If we had a membership involvement minister, we'd grow. If we had a young professional minister, we'd grow. If we could adopt all of these things, then our churches would take off. Well, brethren, I have a question. Is it working? How many people are you baptizing? I'm a numbers guy. You know what I like to do at the end of the year? I like to say, tell me what your program gave us. We spent $20,000 on your program. I'd like to know what the results are. Jason Ryan owns a business. I bet at the end of the year he looks at his business and says, what did it get me? Do I need to cut it or need to add to it? I mean, we're not the federal government. In the Church of Christ, we got to find a way to make things work. We got to make it work. It's got to give us feedback. It's got to give us growth. It's got to in some way show us. So if we keep dumping resources into something that's not giving. So I'm asking you, your benevolent program, how many baptisms did it give you? If it's not giving you baptisms, can we honestly ask without causing us to be offended? We're men. We shouldn't be offended. Should we be able to ask this question? How many souls were saved? And we add up all the benevolence we gave out. Name them. Is it wrong for us to take inventory and figure out where we're at? Is it wrong for us to take a step back and say, well, maybe we should retool and figure out a different way of doing it? If this isn't working, let's figure out a way. Because I know in your professional field, that's what you do. I know I said several men in this campaign say, Rob, I do this in my professional career. Where if you did in your professional career what we've been doing in the Church of Christ, you lost your job a long time ago. Because you're not giving the King of Kings any results. I'd like to take a few minutes and look at some suggestions on how to grow. And I know I was a little hard on you as I began this, but you're men, you're not women. And I believe our men need to be treated like men. He who fails to plan is planning to fail. I want to know, is this the reason why we're struggling? Because we have no plan. We have no plan for growth. We don't really know what to do. And if we don't have a plan for growth, we're not growing. Growth isn't going to happen accidentally. Churches that don't grow just by accident. There's something going on. They're doing something. So let me give you 10 suggestions of things you can do to grow. This is a 10,000-foot view. I'm going to give you the close-up Friday when I meet with your elders and your church leaders. We're going to look at it really carefully. But I want to give the general men a kind of a 10,000-foot view of what growth looks like. Number one, equip your people. You put the right equipment in their hands and they'll grow. And here's what I've learned. In this town, in La Plata, if you just put a Bible in somebody's hand and you go down to Chick-fil-A, you'll get contacts. That's what I've learned. We've been doing it all week. If you put a Bible in the hand of a member and say, go down to Raising Cane's Chicken and get a contact, you'll get one. You go down to the college campus, you get one. Go to the library, you get one. You know what we're finding? They're everywhere. And when Jesus said, lift up your eyes and look on the field for the wide and the harvest, he meant exactly what he said, and it says exactly what he means. We've had college students and workers from all over the nation doing that this week, and they're getting contacts. Brethren, I hope you're ready to work, because we're going to give you a stack of contacts out this thick. You're going to have more contacts than you've ever had in your life. And these are people who said, I want to know more about your church. There's just no one around here that's interested. Brethren, they're walking past your church building hourly. And you're never going to reach them sitting in your office. You're never going to reach them sitting in the pew. You're never going to reach them if you don't reach them. And what I've learned here at Waldorf and La Plata is you've got a lot of people here that are interested. I sat down with a lady this afternoon. Her name's Janice. We talked for quite some time, and she says, you know, I know a lot of people in this community, and they're often wondering what's going on in this church. That's what she told me. She said, people have all sorts of crazy ideas about what goes on in this building. Some people think you're demon-possessed. I don't, she says. But, you know, people say anything. That's what she's telling me. And she says, you know, people just don't know what's going on in there. She says, I decided to come by and see it for myself. And know what I found? Y'all are nice people. And I said, well, thank you. And she said, she says, I think I'm going to come see y'all. And she said, she went over to now listen to this. She goes over to the Safeway over here. She goes to the bakery, and she buys a sheet cake. And she tells the store director, you call that director over there, that campaign, you tell them that's going to be for their Friday barbecue. So the director of that grocery store, and I've talked, his name's Caleb, he runs the whole store. He calls me, and he's been texting me all week. By the way, he's a contact, and you guys ought to talk to him. And he came over, he says, Rob, he says, the grocery store wants to give you the sheet cake. She was going to pay for it, and we're going to donate it to your cause. He said, because what you're doing is for the community. So we're donating the whole thing. He says, I just need to know what message you want on it. I said, welcome neighbors is what I want on it. And that's from somebody who doesn't even attend here. We've got people that don't even attend this church. She walks by your church back and forth, who spent more time in this campaign than some of the members of these churches. That is a disgrace. And there ought to be some hot preaching on Sunday. Where are the people? Because we cannot win souls if we're not here. Oh, brothers, we need your help. If you're listening to this, we need your help. There is a war going on for souls. And we've got to equip our churches with Bibles. These are Bibles. All you got to do is go ask someone, do you have a Bible? You know what people sometimes, no, I don't have one. When Janice was sitting with me for lunch, boy, she talked for 20 minutes. I couldn't get a word in. Finally, she took a breath. I've never seen a person have so much air. I said, Miss Janice, you got a Bible? You know, I don't. Now, for 20 minutes, she told me how religious she was. And she said, I don't have one. I gave one away a long time ago. I said, would you like one? I'd love to have a Bible. I looked over at Jamel, and I said, Jamel, I said, let's go get a Bible for her. And I said, Tabitha, I said, I think if you ask the right questions, you'll have a Bible study. And I think that's what they're doing right now. Is that right, Tim? Yes, sir. It took me about 5 minutes to get a Bible study. And these students went to Chick-fil-A, and it didn't take them 2 minutes to get one. And we sit in our pews, and we say, no one's interested. Let's go to India. That's where we need to go. They're interested in India. Let's go to Costa Rica. We can get them in Costa Rica. You can get them in Waldorf, Maryland. I'm asking you a question, gentlemen. Do you love your neighbors? I think you guys do. But I don't think that everybody does. I think it's a lot easier to say it than to do it. I think it's easy to say we love our neighbors, isn't it? I love my neighbor. I love my neighbor. We need to equip our people. We've got to put Bible evangelistic material in their hands. And we've got to show them how to use it. And we've got to put materials like for bringers, invitation cards in their hands and show them how to invite the cashier at the grocery store. And that's all I did. I walked over to get some fruit with my wife on Sunday. And there he was, as manager for the store. We just got to talking. And just from a simple conversation, what is he? He brings a basket of bread. Y'all remember the basket? We got to procure our equipment. Every military soldier knows you got to have equipment. You're never going to be successful without. The FAA's got equipment. Anything you need, they're going to get it. And they're updating their equipment. They're buying more equipment. You're in the U.S. Navy. They got equipment. You're in the U.S. Army. You got equipment. You work for the federal government. You got equipment. Equipment's required. You work for Jason Wright. You got equipment. You got fencing equipment. Because you don't have the equipment, you can't do the job. Well, brother, we need equipment for our churches. Well, we're pretty well equipped. We got the coffee pot, coffee maker, coffee stirrer, coffee grinds, coffee cups, and we got everything we need for our coffee. In fact, some churches have coffee bars. I've even seen Starbucks in churches of Christ. You say a Starbucks, it was everything but a Starbucks. So see, you against coffee. Brother, try to tell the brethren once they bring in the Starbucks why they can't have their milkshake and the mocha and the latte. And then it's just going to keep going. And if you use popcorn to bring people, you'll take popcorn and candy to keep them. It never ends. And before long, your church won't even look like a church. I've gone into churches before. It makes me sick to my stomach. I look at what they've done, and I can't even recognize a church anymore. Because we've allowed our churches to get way out of hand. This is a place to come worship and serve God. We have houses to eat in. I'm not against having food, but let's not forget our purpose. Let's not forget the reason we're here. We are here to serve and worship God. And we are here to equip our brethren. And all week we've been trying to equip you. I'll give you whatever you want and I'll give it to you. We've got to have equipment. Number two, we've got to put it out there where the brethren can get it. Every church of Christ needs to have a table full of resources. We call these evangelism tables, and you need to have it. You need to put it right out there. And our churches need to make it available for the members. You take whatever you want. If you need back to the Bible, take it. If you need, doesn't matter, take it. If you need whatever you need, you take it because we want you to have it. We understand that providing the material for the people is essential. You don't lock it in the library. You don't put it in a filing cabinet. You don't put a security code on it so you can't get to it. Put it in your foyer. Put a table on the backyard and say, this is evangelism material. Take whatever you want. I went to a church one day and we did a training seminar. And the church, the elder said, we need the equipment. I said, well, here's what I would suggest for a church of 200. And so they got everything they needed. The elders were all in. And so I felt pretty good. The preacher's name's David. And so a few days later, David calls me and says, Rob, I did exactly what we're supposed to do. The first step of your curriculum, it says, go put the materials out in the foyer where the brethren can get it. And so they set up the table, they put the materials, he put the materials out. It looked really good. Kind of like this. And he said, Rob, I came back after a couple of days and I was going through the foyer and I stopped and I noticed something was different. I said, what was it? He said, the table is gone. I said, what do you mean it's gone? He said, it's all gone. I said, brethren, David, do you know what this means? The brethren were hungry. They took it all. I'm a very optimistic person. And he said, no, Rob, that's not what it is. He said, Rob, I put it back out there. I put the table back out there. I put all the materials on it. I said, this is for the brethren. And I went back the next day, the very next day, Rob, and it was gone. I said, what'd you do? He said, called one of the leaders. I said, what did the leader say? He said, the leader said, well, David, when we built this $3 million facility, we put in the bylaws that only authorized things go into the foyer, and that wasn't authorized. And some of the women complained, and they said it didn't match the decor. And so it was gaudy, they said. We don't want to upset the women. And so we decided to move it somewhere else. And he said, where did you move it? He said, we put it in the coat closet. The coat closet. David, are you telling me the evangelism materials that we need to save the lost are in a coat closet? He said, yeah. I said, that must be one big coat closet. He said, it's a big one. I said, where is it? It's just right off to the side of the foyer. I said, okay. I said, what did you do, David? He said, well, I decided to preach because that's one of the lessons I'm supposed to give on the evangelism materials in the coat closet. And after I finished the sermon, I stood by the coat closet and invited the members to come in and get the materials. I said, well, how many people got them? He said, no one. Brethren, if we cannot put evangelism materials in our foyers because it doesn't match the decor, maybe we should sell the building and go home. This is not home interior. And since when have the women been put in charge of the church of Christ? You know why they're in charge? Because the men are nowhere to be found. That's why. Because the men aren't doing their job. And we've abrogated it. Because we should never allow things like that. You said, oh, Rob, that was a one-off. 3 times in 1 year. 3 times in 1 year. We couldn't get materials in our foyers for our members. In 1 year. Number 3, train your people how to use. How many men here in this auditorium have ever been to a training class for work? Raise your hand. Everybody goes to training. Everybody. Because you got to be trained. My dad was the lead, he was the manager over the training department in Delta Airlines. And my dad would tell me, and he'd take me to work with him on occasion. I would visit Dad, and I loved to go in there. I love aviation. And man, that's state-of-the-art stuff. And they're always training people. It's required. You can't work for Delta and not get trained. You have to be signed off. You got to have so many hours. I mean, it's very, very meticulous. And the budget is gargantuan. And they're bringing people in and training. And in fact, they're not only training Delta, they're training the Navy. They're training the Army. They're training other foreign companies. And they're bringing in. And I mean, it's meticulous. I mean, they got it down to a science in there. I said, Dad, that's incredible. And I thought to myself, what kind of training do we get in the Church of Christ? So when's the last time we had a training class on what to do when a visitor walks through the door? I had one lady that said to me, she said, Rob, she says, I visited this church once. I said, you did? I said, tell me about it. She said they were really nice. She said, but they overwhelmed me with love. I said, well, that's really nice. She says, no. She says, you don't understand. They overwhelmed me with love. I said, well, tell me more about that. She says, Rob, she says, I'm an introvert. And she says, I can take a little bit of love. She said, but man, she said, Rob, I had to be honest, I haven't been back because I didn't want to be overwhelmed. And I said, you know, they're genuine. They really do care about you. She says, I know. I call that overboard. And I know we're so excited when a visitor comes through the doors. We get really excited. We do. We all do. And we all want to go talk to them. We all want to surround them. And I'm not faulting you for this at all. I'm so glad that people want to love others. I am. I'm complimenting you on that. But here's what I would suggest. If you had a plan and trained your members on what to do when a visitor comes through the door, that wouldn't happen. Because you know exactly what you're going to do when you're going to do it, and you won't have an overboard experience. And then we have the churches, and this is not you guys. You guys are very loving people. You walk into the church and nothing happens. You literally walk in. She told me, she said, I've been into some churches. She said, at least this church cared about me, because I've been into some churches, Rob, and I sit down and no one talks to you. They don't even look at you. And if someone does look at you, this is what they do. They just keep on going. Kind of awkward. We don't really know what to say. So we kind of nod at you. And I said, I call that the casual nod. Then there's the overboard. And then, of course, we have the third extreme, which is gabbing gossip. Let me tell you about the preacher. Now, I know you don't know Moses well, but let me tell you where he's from and what he does. And now, there's a few things you don't know. We won't talk about it too much. This is Gabby Gossip. Gabby Gossip is in every church of Christ. And then there's Angry Fred. Angry Fred, he growls at you when you walk in. You're in my pew. You took my parking space. You know, I know we laugh about that, but my wife and I were in a church not long ago. We sat down, and this was a pretty good-sized church. My wife and I sat down, and we were sitting, and this lady comes up, and she stands here like this. Yes, ma'am. That's my pew. And my wife said, oh, I'm so sorry. And so we got up, moved to the front pew. And she said, who was that? I don't know. And then this elder comes up to me, and he said, Brother Rob, good to have you this way. Have you met my wife? I said, yeah, I've met her. Brethren, I want to understand something tonight. Are we training our members what to do when visitors walk through the door? Do they need to know? Have we talked about it? Like, what's your job? Like, what's your job? And what is our approach? What are we going to do? How are we going to handle this? Because I know at your place of employment they train you. We need to train our people what to do when a visitor walks through the door. We're going to mess it up. And you know how many chances a visitor normally gives you? One. Just once. They give you one shot. Have we ever trained our people how to knock a door? Have we ever trained our people how to pass out a simple invitation card, what to say, when to do it, how to do it? Have we ever trained our people how to have a Bible study? Have we ever trained our people what to do with the new convert? You have 2 new converts at this church. So what's your plan? What are you going to do? You have a very short window to figure it out. Because many of our new converts walk in the front door, they walk out the back door. We don't have a plan on what to do. Who's assigned to take care of new converts? Who is that individual that's responsible for making sure that new convert is fed the milk of the Word? Who's mentoring them? Who are the mentors? What does it mean to mentor a new convert? Who's teaching the new convert class? Because there's a lot about new converts that must be addressed or you'll lose them. Brethren, you spend a lot of work. There's a lot of time and great investment placed into our new converts. And if we don't think about new converts and get our churches... So this is not about Moses. Moses, this isn't about you. This is about the whole church. We need everyone to help. You can't hire this out. Every member of the church has got to help in some way. Maybe you don't help with new converts. Maybe you help in another area. Maybe you help with the visitors as they walk through the door. That's great. We need you. But everybody's needed. That's why it's congregational. And I know that you can do it. I see it. I see the energy. I see that you guys have the potential to really pull this through and begin a growth process. But we will never find that without training. You've got to train your people. Number 4, you got to promote evangelism in everything you do. There should not be an activity that your church does that doesn't in some way focus on evangelism. Whether it's a vacation Bible school, a pantry giveaway, a coat drive, a backpack drive, I don't know, maybe you have you feed the community. Do you think we're just going to, you think we're just providing Mission Barbecue $18 a person? That's what it's costing us to do this. The Lord's church is shelling it out for this. You think we're doing this just because we want to solve world poverty? We want to take down the homeless encampment? I mean, why are we doing this? What's the purpose behind this? Jesus said the poor will always be with you. You feed them today, they're hungry tomorrow. What's the purpose of this? Who wants to tell me why we're doing this? Because we want to make contacts to save their souls. And if we're not going to make contacts and try to save their souls, brethren, we ought not to do it. We'll let the Lions Club do it. The soup kitchen. I bet your community has a soup kitchen that opens on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Let them do it. Let the federal government do it. Let your state government do it. Let the Rotary Club give out the eyeglasses. But if we're not going to connect it with a soul-saving mission, because that's why we exist, you, brethren, we are an army of soul winners tonight. We exist to save souls, period. We don't exist just to be a social club. If you want a social club, go join the Lions Club. You want to be in an army, a family that's focused on serving the Lord, come to the Waldorf Church of Christ. Amen? That's why we're here. That's the purpose of our existence. So the fourth thing we say to churches is let's put a funnel in the church. You know what a funnel is, fellas? You put a funnel in, maybe what the oil spout, you take off the cap and you put that funnel in, and man, if it don't go through the funnel, it don't go in. It's got to go through the funnel, right? And it's not in there if it don't go through the funnel. You're protecting that engine. Right? And so you put the funnel there and you start pouring in your oil. Here's my suggestion. Put the funnel in the church. You know what the funnel says? Evangelism. And if you can put your VBS through the evangelistic funnel, I'm all in. And you can. If you can put the coat drive in your evangelistic funnel, I'm all in. If you can put your backpack drive in your evangelistic funnel, I'm all in. If you can put your food pantry in the evangelistic funnel, I'm all in. But if you're going to do an activity and it's not focused on reaching people, it's not focused on teaching people, if it's not focused on keeping people, you should dump it. Stop. You're wasting money. And you're wasting time. Most of our churches are very benevolent. We're very giving to our communities. We love our communities. But I would like you to consider the following. How many baptisms did we get from our backpack drive? How many baptisms did we get from our winter coat drive? How many baptisms did we get from our turkey giveaway? How many baptisms did we get from our blessing box? How many baptisms did we get from our teacher supply giveaway? And then, of course, we have churches who actually build an entire building for the sole purpose of having benevolent day once a week. And I'm asking, how many baptisms have you had from your benevolent day that you do once a week? And you have a staff of people working it. You say, surely, Rob, that's not happening. Oh, no, it is happening. We have benevolent buildings that are larger than church buildings. And I'm not against benevolence. I believe we should be kind and gracious and we should help the poor. And I want to help people. And I understand that Jesus did that. But when Jesus fed the 5,000, he preached the gospel. So I'd suggest if we're going to help somebody, maybe they need to hear a sermon. Maybe they need a Bible study. Maybe we say, hey, if you want some food, you come to this church on Tuesday night at 6 o'clock, and we're going to have a film strip we're going to watch for about 30 minutes. It's called the Jewel Miller Visualized Bible Study Series, or Searching for Truth, more modern. We'll watch that, and when we're done watching that, we'll talk to you about your needs. I knew a church in Crossville, Tennessee, that did that very thing. They said, Rob, we've had a benevolent work for 20 years. We've had 0 baptisms. He said, we decided to change what we did. I said, what'd you do? He said, we said in the paper, we put it out, we said, hey, if you want help, come to this church on Tuesday night, 6 o'clock, and we'll help you. So they walked in at 6 o'clock, and they sat down, and I said, we're going to watch a little video first. And then we sat down with evangelists, and we tried to set up Bible studies. And yes, we gave them food, yes. He said, Rob, we had immediately started having baptisms. We went from 0 baptisms, to 20 baptisms. That's because their benevolence became focused and intentional. And so we started to understand that, yes, we can do benevolence, but if we're not following it up with teaching, we don't expect to have conversions. Conversions don't happen because you're nice. Listen, if you're trying to out-nice the community church, you will not win. Have you seen their budget? They will bring in the carnival. You won't. They have no boundaries. So we're not going to out-nice them. There's the one thing that you have at Waldorf and La Plata they don't have. You know what it is, don't you? Thank you. It's the truth. It is the truth. It's the truth that sets us free. It's the truth that people really want. They really want it. They're looking for it. I've heard people all week say, man, I'm looking for a Bible-centered church. I've heard that so many times. Well, we're here. This is who we are. We're the Bible-centered church. One woman told me, she said, I don't want any more phony churches. I said, well, you don't have to go much further. I said, because there's nothing phony about this church. They're authentic. No one gives up their time like some of these men and women have given up this week and are phony. Nobody does that. They're authentic. We got real servants in these churches that want to help you. So what happens? What happens when we do focus our benevolence through evangelism? This is what we get. Her name's Kim. And when I went to Jacksonville, I said, brethren, I said, would you permit me to propose, or would you consider a proposal on how to revamp your benevolent work? And they said, sure. I said, I just have one thing. All benevolent work happens in the church building. That was my only thing. I said, what do you mean? I said, well, if they want benevolence, they got to come. And the elder said, well, we can do that. So the next day, the secretary gets a phone call from Kim Bullock. Kim calls and says, I could use some help. And did your church help? And the secretary said, yes, we do. And she says, well, good. I've been looking for a church that helps. She said, when can I get help? And the secretary responded in like this. She said, Sunday morning at 9:30, and we can't wait to meet you. Oh, no, ma'am, Sunday morning is just not good for me. She said, well, that's okay. Do it at 10:30 again. Ma'am, I told you Sundays are just, I can't get up that early. Don't worry about it. Some of our brothers can't either. And so Sunday evening at 6 o'clock, we'd be glad to see you. Oh, Sundays are just out for me. She said, don't worry. Wednesday night at 7 o'clock, we do it again. I can't take care of it at night. I don't do it at night. Kim said, she said to Kim, Miss Kim, would you like us to come pick you up and bring you to the church? She said, well, if you do that, I'd come. And I said, well, we'll come get you. And so one of our men drove over to pick Kim Bullock up and brought her to church. She came through the back doors, and then she sat down in the pews, and so we began to talk to Kim. And I got her name, her contact information, and she, I asked her how she liked the service. She loved it. I said, Kim, I said, my wife and I have a little custom here at this church. We always invite visitors out to eat. I said, would you like, oh, yes, I'd love to go out to eat. I said, well, good. And so we got to know her. We got her some benevolent help. And would you be shocked to know we had a Bible study and she became a Christian? Would that shock you? You got to make a target list, brethren. You got to have a target list. What we got to do is we got to make a list of people that we know that are lost that we can reach. And so I'm asking you tonight, who do you know that's lost? Eric, do you know anybody that's lost? Put them on your list, son. Put them on your list. Ralph, do you know anybody that's lost? Make a list. It's one of the first things I ask people to do. It's a real simple step. Tim, do you know anybody that's lost? Put them on your list. Just make a simple list. These are the people that are lost that I know. And if we just start there, think about that. Think about your church. You have 50 people sitting in the pews, 40 people, 80 people, whatever it is. But let's just use 50. It's a round number. And everybody makes a list of the people that are lost. You got 50 of them. So 50 times 10. How many contacts did you just create? How many, Elliot? 500 in a matter of just minutes, right? Minutes. You had 500 contacts sitting in your pew in minutes. So what we have to do is we got to begin creating our target list. We create it within the church. And so if I were to ask Moses, could you list 500 people that are lost? Could you do that, Moses? No. Moses, could the Waldorf Church of Christ do that? Yes. That's called congregational evangelism. Do you see the difference? Instead of saying, Moses, you better get out there and work. Moses, you better help us grow. I'm asking, what about you? What about the church? When are we going to ask the church to help us? When are we going to say, hey, church, who do you know? And that's what I did at Willette. I just said, hey, church, help me. Who do you know? Who are the folks that you know? Because we need help. You work with them. You go to school with them. You're somebody that knows people that I don't know. Moses, he wasn't raised in Waldorf. I don't know if you've listened to his accent, but I think it didn't come from Maryland. All right? Some of you were raised here. You know this place. You worked here for a long time. And you know so many people. So we begin by making our list. Then we begin by promoting our churches and letting people know we're here. And that's what we've been doing, going door door to door. We've been asking people, do you know of the Waldorf Church of Christ? Have you heard of us? And so that's when we begin to try to promote our people and let people know we're here for you. Yes, we're over there, 30, is it, what's the small, is it 30 Village, right? 30 Village Street. That's where we're located. And we'd love you to come right across from the Safeway. Just come see us. And we'd love to have you. So we begin to advertise and promote. And when you advertise and promote your church, guess what? People come. People will come. I'll tell you about this couple. I looked in the back of the church one day. I was home for that weekend. And I noticed this couple walk in. I hadn't seen them before. And I looked at Alan Webster. I said, hey, Alan, who is that? He said, it's a visitor. I said, yes. So it gets my blood going. And so anyway, what I did is I waited till the service was over. We sat close to them. And as they turned around, I was right there. I said, hey, my name's Rob. What's your name? And she said, my name is Ellen. I said, Ellen, it's really nice to meet you. And I said, are you visiting? She says, I am. I said, where do you live nearby? Just down the road. I said, well, that's great. I said, Ellen, I'd like to invite you to come and come and eat with us. I'd like to get to know you. And she said, well, you know, my husband, he was coming, got a little ill this morning, and I'd like him to come too. I said, well, I would too. She says, let me see if I can get him to come tonight. I said, well, Ellen, what'd you think of our preach? And she said, that preacher of yours sure does love the Bible. So she told me. I said, yes, Alan loves the Bible. And so she brought her husband that night, and we sat with him, right? And after services, I said, hey, Perry and Ellen, we got a little custom here at this church. We always invite visitors out to eat. And I'd like to know if you'd like to go get a bite to eat. And he said, wow, I'd love to. I said, well, Perry, where's your favorite restaurant? Listen what he said. This is what he said. He said, Venus. Athena's. I said, Perry, I offered Athena's, and that's exactly where I'm going to take. You take me to Athena's? I said, why not? He said, man, I'm not going to miss this. He said, a little squeamish tonight, Mr. Rob. He said, can I take a rain check maybe till Tuesday? I'm going to Athena's. I want to eat. And I said, no worries, Perry, to take me till Tuesday to save up enough money to take you to Athena's. I do not let them choose anymore. Tucker, we go to Zaxby's. No Athena's. All right, do not give them choices. All right, so I'd say McDonald's is more expensive than Zaxby's. And so in any case, so Tuesday rolls around and we go to Athena's, right? We walk in this nice restaurant. I had to make a reservation. We walk in this nice restaurant and we sit down, and I could care less about the lasagna. I got one mission, brother. There's one thing I want. I will get it. And we sat down. We're talking. 3 questions I asked Ralph. Remember what they are? Number 1, where are you from? Oh, from the local area, Rob. I said, well, good. Tell me about growing up here. He told me all about it. I said, what do you do for a living? He said, pest control. I said, man, we got a lot of pests. I said, I'm glad you control them. And number 3, I won't tell you where they're at. Number 3, okay. And I said, what do you like to do? He said, man, I love sports. I said, I do too. I said, I coached ball for 10 years, and I love ball. I said, tell me, what, you watch NFL? He said, no. Watch them anymore. I said, you watch NBA? No, don't like it. Like baseball? Too slow. Okay, I don't know about you guys, but I'm running out of sports. And I said, Mr. Perry, what do you watch? He said, college. College. I said, yes, college, that's it. I said, I love college. I said, Perry, who do you root for? He said, go Alabama. Go Alabama. I got to like Alabama football to get a Bible study, so be it, I don't care. I just want a Bible study. So I got to talk about Alabama football. Can y'all do that? Oh, no. Oh, no. You followed me. Stay away. And so this is what I did. I said, Perry, tell me about Alabama football. He said, Rob, I was at the game a couple weeks ago. He said, they were erecting a statue of Nick Saban in front of the stadium. I said, wow. I said, Perry, we call that idolatry in the church. I said, no, I did not say that. I said, so we just talk football. And when we're done talking football, I said, Perry, do you know that there's going to be a playoff game, college playoff game next week? I said, and we're having a football party. What in the world was that? That was my wife kicking me, because again, she did not know about this party either. And so I said, yes. I said, come. He said, oh, well, this would be great. I'd love to come. And so we had him into the house, and we're just fast forwarding, and we get to halftime, and I looked at Perry. I said, Perry, why'd you visit the Church of Christ? That's what I asked him. 21 years ago, Rob, y'all started sending us this publication called House to House, Heart to Heart. He said, and our church stopped following the Bible years ago. He said, and we're looking for a church that follows it, and we thought that we'd give you a shot, because that magazine's always about the Bible. I said, Perry, do you know a lot about the Church of Christ? Don't know a lot. I said, Perry, would you like to know more about this church? He said, I would. I said, Perry, I just so happen to have these little booklets. And we began the Bible study, and we baptized him in the Christ, and I'm just getting started. Pastor, your seatbelt. Because from that Bible study, they have a son. His name is Nick. And Nick is a prodigal. I mean, he's a true prodigal. And Perry said, Rob, I don't know where he's at, Rob. I said, find him. I'll go talk to him. We brought him home. And we found his wife. We baptized Nick. We baptized his wife. Nick's doing just fine. But we're not done. Because as we promote the church, we're going to find people that are interested. And I want to tell you about these people, because they'll contact your church. And it's when you get contacted by people and they say, I want to know more about your church, and you don't do anything. No excuse for that. Her name's Brenda. And Brenda contacted the church and said, I want to know more about your church. And one of the secretaries called me and she said, Rob, she said, we got this contact from house to house, and the elder said I'm supposed to report all contacts to you. I said, okay. And I said, what do you normally do? Well, we mail them the material. I said, don't do that. She said, but Rob, we always mail them. And I said to her, and that's why you don't have baptisms. We do not mail things to people. I will hand deliver it. Are you sure you want to do that? I said, 100% certain. And so she gave me the materials. My wife and I went to their house, knocked on the door. Brenda comes. I always have my wife in the line of sight, never me. And so I knocked on the door. She opens it up, and she says, hello. I said, ma'am, my name is Rob, my wife Nicole. We're from house to house. You requested some marriage material, and we brought it for you. Oh, I did. Thank you so much, sir. And I said, yes, ma'am. I have a hunch, ma'am, you just got married. I did. I said, I'm so glad. Who is the lucky man? His name is Daniel. And I said, well, is he here? Well, yes. I said, oh, boy. I said, Brenda, is everything okay? Well, no, it's not. She said, I just got married about a month ago, and everything was just fine. And now he's just doing this job. You know, he's got a job. And I said, well, jobs are good, but no, not this one. He comes home exhausted, gets on the couch, won't talk to me. We won't communicate, gets up in the morning, goes to work, comes back, gets on the couch. We're not communicating, and he needs help. I said, well, Brenda, I said, I'm sure he's tired. I said, is there anything we can do for you, by the way, in the community here? She says, there is one thing you can do for me. I said, well, what is it? She says, we're looking for a church home. I said, I may know where one is located. She said, well, where is it? I said, no, right across the road. Here's a church of Christ. Oh, I've never been to one. So now we're talking about the Church of Christ. And it's just going so well. And then finally, Brenda says this, sir, I got one more question for you. I said, what is it? She says, do you know anything about the Bible? I said, yes, ma'am, a little bit. She says, good, because my husband knows nothing about the Bible. And I mean, she just turns into a different person. And brethren, I'm going to mimic what this woman did. I want you to watch this. This is what she did. She goes over to the couch. Daniel is sleeping. I am at the door with my wife. She takes it. Daniel, there are gifts here for you. And she begins to move him. And she shakes him. And Daniel is doing this. And she said, Daniel, it's time to get up, Daniel. And Daniel gets up and, Brenda, what's going on? He said, you have gifts, Daniel. And so he brings big Daniel. Daniel's much taller than me. And Daniel comes over to the door. And she brings him by the hand. And she says, Daniel, brethren, I promise this is what, I am not making this up. This is what this woman did. She says, Daniel, we're going to teach you the Bible. And she pointed at him. My response, when do you want to begin? She said, tomorrow. I said, my wife will bring the cookies. We baptized 7 people because of that visit. Because Daniel and Brenda have family. And there's Winford. Winford is brother-in-law. We're going to baptize him. And they have other family, among whom, if you'll remember this name from last night, is Geneva. You remember her? She's in the picture. What happens, brethren, when you evangelize? You baptize. What happens when you sit in the pew? You die. You got to get busy, brethren. They're out there. There are Brendas everywhere. There are Jitters everywhere. And I could show you I could show you slide after slide of what happens when a church gets busy. And we're having similar percentages to that. I'm going to give you the percentages tonight. But it's very similar to this. In other words, we go out to the community, we work, and we come back and we count. How many people did we talk to? And how many of those people requested to know more about the church? And we consistently, all over this country, in Maryland, in Illinois, in Tennessee, in Alabama, Georgia, and Texas, we consistently get between 20 and 30%. I've yet to see it broken. And all Waldorf and La Plata proved was it works. That's all you've done this week. In fact, you may have a higher percentage than average. New movers. If you want to know how to reach people who move into your community, you join me tomorrow morning and I'll teach you. Because there is nothing that's more effective than this. You know what my percentage is for new movers? I'll show you the chart again. I want you to look at it. You want to know what my percentage is? Can anybody read that chart? 80%. 80%. And so we go to the home of a new mover, we talk to them 80% of the time. While we were at Granbury Street, Texas, we made a contact. Would you like to know how to do that, Ralph? 80%, pretty good, isn't it? Would you like to know where they live? How many of you would like to know their names? How many of you would like to know where they live? How many of you would like to participate and get involved? And let's go visit some new movers. In fact, tonight, you're going to help me. I'm not letting you go until you help me. We got work to do tonight. David Shannon said in a polishing the pulpit one year, I wrote this down because it was so good. I can't say it better, so I'm just going to quote him. He said, people are most likely to change churches when they move. A couple of generations ago, if a family or an individual moved from one city to another city, they usually stayed in that same denomination. Those days are over. It doesn't matter to me what church they were in the last town. I want them to visit the Church of Christ. He went on to say, this is a powerful opportunity for evangelism. It doesn't matter to me what church they were attending. I want them to come to the Church of Christ because it gives us the best opportunity to sit down and study the Word of God. So we'd like to give you a plan of how to approach new movers. I'd like to train you. I'd like to give you the list. Tucker asked me today at lunch, how do you get that list? Same way Lowe's gets it. How do you think Lowe's gets that list? They buy it. We have a contract with the same company, and we buy it every month. We buy it all over this country. And I have the names and addresses to give you tonight. I can tell you where they live. Bannister Street, y'all been there before? Sheffield, been there before? Anybody know where that's at? I don't live here. I'm asking you. You live here. Yes. That's where they're at. I got their address. I even know their name. I'll give you a script if you memorize it. I'll show you how to go to the door. I'll give you a gift in your hand, and we're going to make those gifts tonight. And I'll tell you what happens when you start doing that. You're going to have some baptisms. You're going to have new members. I'll tell you about what happens when you start writing cards. Lots of cards. Not one card, but I'm talking hundreds of cards. And you're going to start sending them out. You know what happens when you do that? That's what you get. You get Bettina, who when we walked into her home, and she asked my wife her name. My wife said, my name's Nicole. She said, honey, well, your card's right here. And she pointed right at it. She had 50 cards in that stack, and she knew what my wife's card was. How did she do that, brother? She's wrong. Andrew, she reads it every day. And Moses, she was waiting for someone to come see her. And that someone needs to be you. It needs to be you, brother. We need to go see her. And you know what happens when we see her? You see that back to the Bible on the table? It's called a Bible study. I don't baptize people without opening my Bible and making sure they know what they're doing. Because if I just baptize them, you'll never see them again. I want to make sure they understand what they're doing. And so when I'm finished with that study, we'll baptize her, and we did. I'll tell you the end of the story. 6 months later, I was driving back from a training seminar and got a phone call from one of the sisters. She was checking on her. She said, Rob, I'm at Bettina's house. And I said, what's going on? She said, Rob, she's blue, Rob. Rob, her oxygen tank, it ran out. I said, can you revive her? She said, I've already tried, Rob. Rebecca said, I've already tried, Rob. The paramedics are coming, but Rob, she's not going to make it. What's really sad about this story, and I'm going to end right here. What's really sad about this story, brother, is when I finished that study with Bettina, I asked her a question. I said, Bettina, it seems to me that you know a little bit about the Church of Christ. I'd like to know how. And she said, well, she says, I didn't grow up in the Church of Christ, and I'm not a Church of Christ. And I said, well, okay. Well, tell me, how do you know something? She said, well, the last town I was in, my church wouldn't pick me up, and the Church of Christ was right across the highway, the road. I just walked there. I said, well, how long did you go to this Church of Christ? Oh, about 7 years. I said, 7 years you went to the church? Oh, yes. I said, well, Bettina, do you mind if I ask you a couple of questions about? Oh, yes, ask me anything you want, honey. I said, man, when you were going to this Church of Christ, did anybody ever, offer a Bible study? No. This is my first time. I said, so Bettina, you didn't go much, probably, once a month? No, honey, I went every week. Let me make sure I understand. So you went to a Church of Christ every week for 7 years? Yep, Sunday morning and Wednesday night. Bettina, no one offered to study the Bible with you? Not once. Anybody want to know why we're dying? They're in your pew. They're sitting among us. And we do nothing. We do absolutely nothing. But Plato and Waldorf have work to do. What you do in the next 90 days may determine whether or not you're here in the next 10 years. Brethren, if you can't take this and run with it, God help you. You've got some wind at your back. And it's blowing stiff. We've come all in. We love you. I promise I won't leave you. You'll have to fire me to get rid of me. Because I'm going to give you a foolproof curriculum to follow. I'll guide you step by step. We'll send people here. You got one of our regional trainers sitting right in this auditorium who understands this backwards and forwards. And he's been waiting for this day. And now it's come. And what will you do with it? What's going to happen? Are we going to train people what to do when visitors walk through the door? Because if we do, that's what we get. In Ephesians chapter 3, verses 9 and 10, it says, this intent, and now unto principalities and powers in heavenly places. It might be made known by the church, the manifold wisdom of God, which is according to his eternal purpose, which he purposed with Christ Jesus our Lord. I got a question for the men tonight. What's the purpose of the church? Why are you here? Well, Paul said it was to make known to the world the manifold wisdom of God. And I'm afraid that many of our churches have forgotten their purpose. And we're nothing more than a glorified civic club. And let's not forget tonight that you are an army. You're the army of the Lord. And we have a war to fight, and we have souls to save. And God help us if we ever lose sight of that mission. Thank you for listening. Everybody's going to come back together. The ladies will come back in here as soon as they're done with their class, and we're going to have an invitation. And then we're going to have some activities. We're glad you're here. Please don't leave. Please don't leave. Hey, no.